I made this drawing of the Imperial Railway Station at Hietzing in Vienna for a video a couple of months ago. And it was just going to be a line drawing, which is why there's the hatch in here, but I was never really happy with how it looked. So I've decided to use it to see just what difference applying marker to it will make. And I think it's really quite an amazing transformation. So just watch it over this 10 minutes and see how it goes. Now I'm using Copic sketch markers, an alcohol-based marker. I'm using the neutral grey colour, and in this drawing I'm using 7 different values from N0 to N6. So 7 different values from lighter to darker. I start with N3 for that fascia on the left-hand side, and add a few more N3, N4 values. And then I switch to N0 and N1 just for this dome on the actual pavilion of the station itself. And now I pick up an N4 and do some heavier parts. The thing about values are we read them according to the values around them. So it's not always possible to know exactly what we really want to put, what will look most effective, until we've got a little more happening elsewhere in the picture. And so for that reason, it's best to, if in doubt, go a little bit lighter than we think, because, well, it's always easier to make it darker. We can't really make it lighter. So particularly in a smaller scene such as this, that's a pretty feasible plan of attack anyway. So I'm starting on the pavilion because it's probably the simplest part. There isn't a huge amount. The white is quite significant, the white of the walls. And this window, this large window, is a bit of a challenge. Reflections, things we see behind glass can often be a bit of a challenge in drawing and in tonal work as well. So now I'm doing the right-hand fascia darker value, and N4 I'm using for that. And I want to just put some of the darker values in underneath this right-hand side. So I'm using an N5 now just for some really dark spots. And at this stage in the drawing, I'm not sure whether N5 is going to be the darkest value that I use. And I am very aware of the inadequacy of the line work on the right-hand side under the awning. So I'm thinking I'm going to have to do something with the tone to establish a little more form under there. Now I have actually switched to a 6 to do this shadow under the actual tunnel part, if you like, going under the pavilion. And I think the dark formed a nice frame, but I've got rid of the N6 and I'm going back to a couple of the lighter values on the darker side. So I'm just trying to sort of soften the edge of this shadow going across the railway tracks. And now that I've got that nice dark center frame, if you like, it's easier for me to get a sense of what values I want to use. Now I'm using N3 right now for these darker shadows behind the glass. And then I use N2 and N1. And I decide that that's not dark enough, and so I get N4 and put it over the top. So this is the kind of back and forth toing and froing I find for my style, my technique of applying value, applying this marker tone, seems to work best. And I put a thin darker, I think an N5 band around that window just to kind of snap it into place a little more. And now I start to do the work between the tracks and start to work on the more complex values of this lower part of the drawing. So I'm defining that ducting that goes under there on the right-hand side. Now there's a pipe I've looked more closely and seen that hangs under the bracing struts that support the awning that goes over the platform. So I'm trying to just purely using my marker, I'm trying to represent that. But I want it to be a fairly subtle effect. I don't want it to be really obvious. And at this point, I'm doing it with N4 and N5. But by the end, I'm going to redo that with N5 and N6. And it's that back and forth, just bumping the pens, the values that I've used, up one value and making the adjustment across whatever values I've used in that part. Now there is a nice real darkness in this back right-hand side, and I wanted to capture that. The commuters are all quite dark, so I'm putting some values there. But now I want to work on some of the values between the tracks. Now, these are a bit of a challenge because it's not just value, but it's texture as well. There's a whole range of different surfaces here that I've made some effort with the line work to distinguish, and now I want to reinforce that line work variation with my marks with the markers. So now I'm working on these commuters a bit and just trying to work out how distinct to make them, how much to blend them into the background. I actually wish I'd left one of the figures lighter, one of those more forward figures lighter than I finish up having them at the end. Now, with this view that we get through the space under the pavilion, I actually don't follow the reference too much. I decide that it's fairly central, it's fairly key, and so what I'm going to do is adjust the values for that framed view, simply according to what I think will look best for my scene. And because we've got the two sides of the station looking quite dark, I think having generally a lighter view through between the arms, if you like, of the platform will work better. So you can see me here experimenting with the values that I'm using and changing to an N5 and an N6. And I think I might have used an N4 for part of the pipe as well, just so that it stands out a little bit lighter where it's closer to us. So now I'm just working on what we see through the platform. I'm making that bit of the wall where it curves away from us darker than it is in the reference, because I feel that just helps make it clearer what's happening. It helps to define the actual form better. We shouldn't be a slave to our reference. Our reference is our starting point, but the drawing is what we're creating. It's the artwork. And as the artist, it's where we bring what we add to what's there and create the effect we're wanting. So I'm trying to go a little bit gently with this and work out how dark to put lines around the rails. And in the end, I made them quite dark, the lines around the rails, because I want the rails to look like reflective metal, like a reflective silvery surface. And I realized I hadn't got that little bit of roof up the top defined properly with my line work, so I again just defined it with a darker tonal value. So now I'm aware now that I'm close to the end, so I'm just making adjustments and stepping back from the table to look down through the camera, which is often a good way of getting a new look at what we're doing. And so it's pretty much done at this stage. I decided just to make a few more adjustments. I don't know what happened with the light in there. So I just darkened this edge a little bit, and you can see whether you think these adjustments are worth it or not. And I'm wishing I could make one of those figures slightly lighter just to bring them forward and give a little more visual movement in that dark corner at the end of the platform. But no going back now. Once the line's on, and then I'm pretty much sure at this stage that I'm done. Well, what do you think? I think it's a very significant improvement on what we had. And for 30 minutes work, I think I've really popped this view and added an incredible sense of 3 dimensions to it. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you found this interesting, helpful. I'll post the line drawing on my community page if you want to have a go at adding the tone to this imperial or former imperial pavilion at the Heatsink Railway Station adjoining Schönbrunn Palace. But whatever you draw and however you're drawing it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.